Hola clase, hoy vamos a estudiar 4 verbos muy importantes. El verbo dar, el verbo haber, el verbo hacer y finalmente el verbo tener. ¿Ok? Entonces nosotros vamos a aprender, vamos a aprender cómo utilizar estos 4 verbos de la forma correcta. ¿Ok? Entonces vamos a aprender a conjugar los verbos, a usar los verbos en frases normales y vamos a aprender a utilizar los verbos en algunas formas especiales. Entonces, estos verbos aprendemos la conjugación, ¿no? La conjugación de los verbos. Aprendemos el uso normal y aprendemos a usarles de forma especial. Usos especiales. Este S está muy mal. De formas especiales. ¿Ok? Entonces, vamos. ¿Por qué no? Muy bien. Tenemos el verbo dar. El verbo dar. En inglés, el verbo dar significa, signifies. El verbo dar significa to give. ¿Ok? Dar, to give. ¿Y cómo vamos a conjugar ese verbo? Bueno, empezamos con los 6 pronombres. ¿Está bien? Los pronombres indicativos. Yo, tú, etc. Escriba en tu cuaderno. Write this in your notebook. Write in your notebook. Dar, to give. Yo, tú, él, nosotros, vosotros y ellos. ¿Ok? Y vamos. Dar, to give, al presente del indicativo. Yo doy. Tú das. Él da. Doy, das, da. Doy, das, da. ¿Ok? Entonces, yo doy, I give. Tú das, you give. Él da, he gives. And of course, we would use this for ella and for the third person formal usted, which we haven't really looked at yet. Doy, das, da. Damos, dais, dan. Damos, dais, dan. We give, y'all give, they give. ¿Estamos? Dar, to give, doy, das, da, damos, dais, dan. Entonces, un uso normal, ¿no? Vamos. Yo doy pizza a mi madre. Yo doy pizza a mi madre. I give pizza to my mother. O ellos dan dinero al chico. Ellos dan dinero al chico. They give money to the boy. Ellos dan dinero al chico. Pretty straightforward. El uso del verbo dar normal. ¿Ok? Pero vamos a estudiar unas formas especiales también. So in your book, which is what this lecture is based off of, pages 14 through 17 of your book, there are some examples of using the verbo dar. Okay, so on page 14, there's the phrase dar un abrazo and the sentence le da un abrazo a su amigo. Or dar gritos, to shout. La multitud, the multitude, the crowd, la multitud da gritos. Okay, so there are a lot of ways in which we'll learn organically that Spanish speakers use the word give to say that something is happening. So, for example, el manzano da manzanas. Okay. El manzano da manzanas. The apple tree gives apples. Okay, so it's producing apples. Apples are happening, it gives apples. La higuera. Figs in Spanish are higos. The higuera is the figure or fig tree because it gives figs. La higuera da fruta. The fig tree gives fruit. Okay, so with these usos especiales, it's more a matter of learning how to translate, right? One day you can talk this way, but when you see stuff like this and you hear stuff like this, you want to be flexible. You don't want to be thinking, and this can be a struggle for younger students, especially if it's the first time studying a language. And I know you guys have been running into this sort of thing a little bit with Easy Spanish Reader. And by that sort of thing, I mean making it work in English, being generous with your understanding. So the fig tree gives fruit is not good English, but we understand, if we're flexible, that when we say the fig tree gives fruit, that we're saying the fig tree is producing fruit, making fruit, fruiting, whatever you want to call it. So then you can find a way to translate that nicely into English, and whether you're translating or not, you can understand that the fig tree is producing. Okay? Entonces, dar, to give. I give pizza to my mother, doy pizza a mi madre. Okay, al próximo, to the next one. Okay, muy bien. So I've decided to skip haber until the end. I want to talk about haber last because it is a very special verb. So if you're following along in your book, we're now on page 15 looking at hacer. Okay, so hacer significa to make or to do in inglés. Hacer, to make or to do. This is why you may hear Spanish speakers, when they're speaking English, struggle. They might say that they are going to do a cake instead of make a cake. Okay? Or they might say that they're going to make a run or do a run. Okay, so it can get confusing for them, just as it may for you. But it's nice to kind of, for us to know there's just one word for make or do. Okay, there's some special uses we can look at. There's just one word for make or to do. So whether you're making a cake or doing a job, it's going to be hacer. Okay? Yo hago, tú haces, él hace, nosotros hacemos, vosotros hacéis, ellos hacen. Like that, the only place it's irregular is in yo, okay, for the present. Okay, in the present, it's nice and regular. You just have to remember yo hago. Otherwise, you just run down the line like a normal ER verb. ¿Está bien? Ok, entonces, un ejemplo. Yo hago el examen. I do the test. Oh, we shouldn't do yo. Let's do a different one. Él hace la comida. He makes the food. Okay? Now, just as in English, and we might say, I do the exam or I'm doing the exam, but we also might say, I'm taking, right? Or here we might say, instead of he makes the food, we might say he prepares the food. Okay, so there are other words that can be used, but this works just like to make or to do. Okay? Now there's some special uses in the book, but the one I want to pay attention to here is the one related to weather. We've talked a little bit about, for example, the verb tener being what we use for age. And we're going to hit that again in this lecture. But we use the verb tener to have for age. So in Spanish we say, I have 42 years, not I am 42 years old. We don't use a form of to be. Okay, so here's another, for English speakers, unusual use of a verb. We use the verb hacer, which means to make, for weather. Okay? So if it's snowing, we're going to say it makes snow. Hace nieve. Brr. No? Hace nieve. It's snowing. Or I might say it's cold. In English, that's a to be verb. It is cold. In Spanish, hace frío. Hace frío. Frío is cold. It makes cold, but of course we're not going to say that in English, so it is cold. Okay? Entonces, hace nieve, hace frío, hace sol. It makes sun, it is sunny. All right? So, hacer for weather. And it's always going to be the third person, right? Because we're talking about days. El día hace calor. Or we're talking about weather. El tiempo, the time or weather. El tiempo hace sol. Okay? El día hace calor, the day is hot. El tiempo hace sol, the day is sunny. But literally, the day makes heat and the day makes sun. Okay? And the weather makes sun. Okay? El día hace calor, el tiempo hace sol. Entonces, para hablar de clima, to talk about climate, para hablar de clima, usamos el verbo hacer. Okay? Hace sol, hace frío. Ok, estamos. Ok, muy bien. El tercero verbo. Ok, el tercero de 4. Entonces, el verbo tener en inglés significa to have. Y es el siguiente. It's the following, es el siguiente. Yo tengo, tú tienes, él tiene, nosotros tenemos, vosotros tenéis, ellos tienen. Tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, tienen. ¿Ok? Y hay que memorizar todos estos verbos. Hay que saber así. You gotta know it like this. Hay que saber así. ¿Ok? Entonces vamos. Yo tengo. It just means to have, right? We'll talk about the special uses soon, but it just means to have. So if I say yo tengo, it's I have. Yo tengo qué? ¿Qué tengo yo? Bueno, yo tengo un perro. ¿Okay? A ver, tú tienes amor en tu corazón. Tú tienes amor en tu corazón. You have love in your heart. Tú tienes amor. That's a sentence right there, isn't it? Subject, verb, object. Tú tienes amor. Punto. No, we'll expand it a little bit. Tú tienes amor en tu corazón. Okay? You got love in your heart. You have love. Okay. O Jesucristo. What do you guys think that word means? Jesucristo. Jesucristo tiene a ti. And we'll learn a little more about using an article for after tener. We'll do that later. Not an article. Goodness, that's an article in English. Using a preposition. But yeah, so you can't say that. And I'm not going to talk about why yet. Jesucristo tiene a ti. What do you think that means? Jesucristo tiene a ti. So this is Jesus Christ, right? Jesucristo. Jesus Christ has, and we chose él, because obviously Jesus Christ is a man, right? But it's a third person, right? We're talking about him. It's not me, it's not you, it's Jesus the Christ. So third person singular. Jesus Christ has you. Okay? Jesucristo tiene a ti. Now I really want to emphasize the importance because we're going to be bringing more vocabulary in soon. We got a good bit of vocabulary in the last couple of weeks. There are basically two parts to being able to really start being productive in Spanish. If you learn a bunch of vocabulary, that's great, right? We're getting there. The other thing you need to do is learn how to use the verbs easily and without thinking. If you can do that, all the other little pieces will just fall into place. Okay, so learning vocabulary, great, and honestly, probably more fun than learning the verbs. But we need to do both in order to do well, and speaking of fun, doing well and being able to speak is the ultimate goal, not only for academic achievement, but for enjoying this language. So memorize your verbs. Tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, tienen. ¿Ok? Entonces, hablamos de hacer, de dar y de tener. Ahora, vamos a hablar de haber. Actually, no vamos a hablar de haber todavía yet. There was a note I wanted to make to you guys, and that is that tener que is have to. It works like have to in English. So tener is to have. So when you're obligated, obliged to do something, I have to go to the park, I have to do my homework. Mom says I have to. That's tener que. Tengo que estudiar. So take a moment, read those two sentences, and see if before I translate them, you can understand what they mean. If tener que means have to. I'll block the sentences for a moment. All right, tener que means have to. Tengo que estudiar. Tienen que cocinar. So, tengo que estudiar. I have to study. Tienen que cocinar. They have to cook. Okay? So if you gotta do something, if you have to do something, you get to use tener que. Okay, so that's a nice special use. There are others mentioned in the book that you should take a look at in order to do the exercises. Okay, hablamos del verbo haber. Haber. Y haber es un verbo muy especial. Entonces voy a hablar en inglés. Okay? Haber es un verbo especial. Entonces voy a hablar en inglés. Haber is a very special verb, so I'm going to speak in English. All right. Haber, I've written here, means to have or to be. Except that that's funky. It mostly means that in a helping verb sort of way. You all remember what helping or auxiliary verbs are from your English classes. They are verbs that help the main verb. Okay, so for example, I have run, right? You have a participle there and you have the helping verb. So I have run. Have in that case is a helping verb, and Spanish has that to accomplish some other tenses. We should be familiar with it. One of the most important things is for you guys to realize it. We've taken a look at the verb I, at the word I, right? So we said, and we've worked with this, that I means there is, there are. So if I say que hay pizza, that means there's pizza. Welcome to my house. Bienvenido a mi casa. Hay pizza. There's pizza. Okay? Hay tres chicos aquí. Hay tres chicos aquí. There are 3 boys here. Hay tres chicos aquí. So I comes from haber, to have or to be. Okay? So we're saying that there has pizza or there be pizza, there is pizza, right? Hay pizza. Entonces, hay viene de haber. So how do we pronounce these? Right? With that H, it could be funky. Yo he, tú has, el ha. Nosotros hemos, vosotros habéis, ellos han. Has, ha, hemos, habéis, ha. So your book on page 14 and 15 talks about a couple of these uses of haber. They're going to be nice and easy. These verbs are verbs that this is a conjugation that we are going to begin to use later on, okay? But right now, we can start interacting with I in a nice, fulsome way. And there are a couple of ways that I gets used that goes beyond the natural, hey, if I say there are 3 cats, in Spanish I'll say, hay tres gatos, and we're done. Okay, so that's great, but there's a little more to I than that. And in your book, you'll see. We talked about tener que. Yo tengo que comer. I have to eat. So tener que is to have to. Okay, but hay que. Hay que is also used to express obligation. I actually use this quite a bit. Without thinking about it, I used it in this lecture. Okay, so when and if you watch a second time, you might hear me use it. This is very common. Okay, hay que. And you could think of it as a bunch of several different phrases, and I'll give them all to you. But basically it means it has to be. One has to. Okay? So, hay que estudiar para aprender. Hay que estudiar para aprender. So, study to learn. Hay que, one has to study to learn. You gotta study to learn. Okay, so it's impersonal. It's not like yo tengo que, I have to. Tú tienes que, you have to. Okay, one has to study to learn. Okay, so the example they have in the book is, wow, okay, yeah. I guess I just remember from the lesson. The example they gave in the book is exactly the example I gave. All right. And the other thing is that they have written down the expressions or the phrases haber sol y haber neblina. If you're following along in your book, you can see haber sol means for it to be sunny. Well, okay. So haber sol and haber neblina, it's always going to be conjugated, and we're not going to conjugate it to one of these. We're going to use I. So that's, you're seeing that I is associated with just the verb haber. So the sentence that they have for sol is, I sol por la mañana. I sol por la mañana. Being 6'9", I really should have put this whiteboard higher, but I decided to be nice to the other people in here. So let's look at just that sentence, okay? I sol por la mañana. Now we can say as the translation that there is sun in the morning, okay? And they've translated in the book as it is sunny in the morning. So this is where, remember I said that I, haber, they do more than just the there is, there are. And how do you know that? Because when you say in English, there is sun in the morning, that's weird and uncomfortable. What does it mean to say there is sun in the morning? It sounds like a sentence that makes sense, but then you think about it. There is sun in the morning. Do you mean it is sunny in the morning? Which is why I have both to have and to be in haber. Okay? So when Spanish speakers use the haber to have, we'll translate it as there is and there are, but they're not thinking that. They're just thinking that there have 3 tables in this room. Hay 3 mesas en esa sala. Okay? So it's important to know that. So to have or to be, depending on context, and when you translate it, you'll have to make the decision that leads to the most natural production of English. And when you're speaking, you'll learn to do things like that, this eventually, but you don't have to right now. You can actually just do other things you've learned, like hace sol por la mañana. And you still get it is sunny in the morning. Okay. So that was today's lesson. Haber, tener, dar, y hacer. Okay? So use those flashcards associated with this chapter. Start getting these verbs down. Okay? So over the next 2 weeks or so, we will be doing exercises with them. I would like you to set the goal to within 2 weeks have all of these memorized. Okay? So use office hours, make study dates with your colegas, your classmates, and we'll work on these in recitation as well. But if you don't do work on your own, you're not going to get there. So in the next 2 weeks, make sure you have these memorized, besides, of course, your posted assignments. All right? Hasta la próxima. Until the next one. Ciao.